حبيب قلوبنا والشفيع لذنوبنا وتبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعاديات ضبحا فالموريات قدحا فالمغيرات صبحا فأثرن به نقعا فوسطن به جمعا. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When we discuss the concept and the idea of the art of war, which has been presented by many scholars in the past, there is an understanding that an art of, amongst a general or a leader of a community or a society must have specialized knowledge, especially when it comes to warfare. And scholars realize that the art of war is something which is an absolute necessity to protect the state and the people of the state, to protect society and to uphold peace and tranquility amongst the people of society. When it comes to the art of war and the specialization of having knowledge of how to engage in battle and warfare, you find that there are those who say that it is an absolute necessity, especially when there is a threat that comes from outside. So within a state, there are threats from within. People who violate the law of the land, for example, who are classified as criminals, you'll find that the law will stand forward and hold these individuals through judgment. They are a threat to the people, they are a threat to the security of the people of the state, and so they deserve to be punished. Likewise, at times, threats come from outside, externally, and so therefore military and the power of the military has to be established in order to counteract the threats from outside. When it comes to upholding peace and tranquility and the prosperity of the state, war and battle, bloodshed, and everything that is associated with it is an absolute necessity. Beyond this, when you examine, for example, the characteristics of a leader who is a master in the art of war, amongst them there are certain opinions that have been presented. So one of these classifications or characteristics is that the leader, for example, must know when to engage in war and battle and when not to fight. When to fight and when not to fight. And what's interesting is that when we classify and when we examine the biography of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, we see that the Prophet was a master in the art of war, an absolute master. Now, question arises, if the Prophet was a master in the art of war and he had specialized knowledge in how to engage in battle and warfare, where did this knowledge come from? Because historically, the Prophet was a shepherd. He was a shepherd. So where did that military knowledge come from? We say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connected directly through him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through revelation used to communicate with Rasulullah. In the Holy Quran, for example, وَقَدْ نُورِيَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Ibrahim, Allah exposes and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows Ibrahim the minute intricacies of the heavens and the earth. If Ibrahim was shown the heavens and the earth, then what of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa? The Prophet was given military knowledge through revelation despite his inexperience in the actual area of war and battle. And we see examples of this in the Holy Quran. Talut, who was not even recognized as a prophet. And we discussed the story of Talut. Talut was chosen directly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a king amongst the Bani Israel that led them towards war and towards battle against Jalut. And of course, we examined the life of Dawood alayhi salam and how he was part of the army of Talut and so on and so forth. Talut, when you examine his history as we did, we said that he was the son of a farmer. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him specialized knowledge in terms of, or in the areas of military warfare. Likewise, the Holy Prophet of Islam was given knowledge of military warfare. When it comes to the discussions surrounding Islam and war specifically, a question arises, and the question is, if Islam is a religion of peace, then why is it that the Prophet of Islam engaged in battle and warfare and was engaged in many bloodsheds, especially in his time in Medina? The answer that the ulama came forward and presented, they said that Islam is not a pacifist religion. Islam is not a pacifist religion, nor should the Muslims be pacifists. In the sense that when threat is proposed and threat is directed towards us as Muslims, we have the moral obligation and the responsibility to counteract that threat, to defend ourselves and to defend our families and to defend our properties and of course the members of our community. Islam demands that we defend ourselves in face of threats. This goes against the idea presented, the doctrine presented by Christianity. Christianity says that if a person was to slap you on your right, you give them the left. Islam says no, a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. We have in our fiqh the whole concept of qasas, that if someone was to, for example, violate your rights, you have every right to defend yourself. If a person, for example, wishes to oppress you, beautifully in the discussions of the oppressed and oppression and the oppressor, Islam comes forward and says that it is the oppressed has certain responsibilities. A person who is victimized, a person who is oppressed has the responsibility to defend themselves against the oppressor at whatever capacity. He may not necessarily have the power to fight back, but he has to fight back at whatever capacity. If he cannot fight back, then he has to help and ask for help. He needs to ask for help. And those who hear the cries of the oppressed, they have the moral obligation to help. Islam is a social religion as well, that we all have to take on the responsibility to try and create a balance, an equilibrium between the oppressor and the oppressed, to eliminate oppression as a whole and to defend the oppressed at whatever capacity. If Islam is a religion of peace, at the same time, it is not a religion of pacifism, that when threat is proposed, we just sit back and allow ourselves to be victimized. No, we ought to defend ourselves. And this was beautifully seen by the Prophet of Islam during his time in Medina. The Prophet of Islam, whenever there was a threat from outside, external threats that threatened the peace and the tranquility and the prosperity of the Muslims, the Prophet would definitely engage in warfare. The Prophet would engage in battle. As the ayah of the Holy Quran says, he was ashudda ala al-kuffar, extreme when it came to his interactions with those who threatened the peace of Islam and the sanctity of Islam. But at the same time, the Prophet was ruhama amongst the believers. He was a merciful leader amongst the believers. لو كنت فظا غليظا, for example, رحمة للعالمين. The Prophet was very much a manifestation of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it came to his opposition to the threats that was proposed to him from outside, the Prophet of Islam would always engage in military warfare. Now, in the discussions of the art of war, there's a beautiful idea that at times the leader has to embrace the idea of engaging in preemptive action. Which means what? Which means that the leader must be comfortable taking an offensive position. He cannot embrace a defensive position all the time. At times, he must be offensive. When it comes to the battles in the religion of Islam, were these battles offensive or defensive? You find that whenever these questions are raised, we say that every battle or majority of the battles within the religion of Islam were defensive. Badr, Uhud, Khandaq, Khaybar, Tabuk, for example, all of these were defensive battles. But then at times the Prophet of Allah engaged in offensive battles as well. One of these battles is the ayat which I presented, which is shown in Surah Al-Adiyat. The battle which the Prophet of Allah took an offensive position is known as the Battle of Raat al-Salasil, the Battle of the Chains. And of course, discussing the idea behind the Battle of Chains or Raat al-Salasil, Ma'arakat Raat al-Salasil is of importance, number one, because it has a Quranic presence to it. And number two, just as important, it highlights the fadila of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. It highlights the maqam of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and his association with the Prophet of Allah and his closeness to the risala of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Surah Al-Adiyat, the first 5 verses of Surah Al-Adiyat refers to the battle of Dhat al-Salasil. Now, what's interesting is, just as a side note before I engage in the discussions of Dhat al-Salasil, you'll find that when you research about what happened exactly in this battle, you'll find that there are different versions to this battle. And there are great inconsistencies between the information provided. The Sunnis, for example, have their version of what happened in Ma'arakat al-Dhat al-Salasil, in the Battle of the Chains. And the Shias, we have our own version as well. Amongst the Shias, again, there are minute differences with regards to the aspects of this battle, the story or the narrative of this battle, who said what and what happened and how it happened and all of these things. Minute differences. Why are there great inconsistencies between the Sunni and the Shia? Amongst our scholars, they said that because there were multiple battles that were given the same name. So there was one battle, for example, that took place during the Khilafat of the Rashideen, the Khilafat of the 3 Caliphs. They said, for example, historians, that during the time of Abu Bakr, the first Caliph, there was a battle that was led against the Persians. And this battle was coined, or it was named, Dhat al-Salasil. Likewise, and the champion of this battle was whom? Khalid ibn Walid, a very dodgy character. We have a lot of reservations to such a person. But nonetheless, he was seen as a champion in this battle. You have a second version of Dhat al-Salasil that took place in the 8th year of Hijrah. The champion of this battle is Amr ibn al-As. Again, Amr ibn al-As, who just became Muslim a few months before this battle, is seen as a champion in this battle. Again, a very dodgy character. We question his identity, his affiliation with Rasulullah, especially since he was the one who stood alongside Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan in Siffin against Ali alayhi salam. And then we have our version, and the champion of our version is none other than Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. When the Imam engages in the battle of Dhat al-Salasil, the ayats of Surah Al-Adiyat, Surah 100 of the Holy Quran, were revealed. Now, before going into the tafsir of this verse or the historical background of Dhat al-Salasil, some of the merits highlighted to us by the Ahl al-Bayt in the recitation of Surah Al-Adiyat is important for me to mention. One of the merits, as highlighted by Imam Jaffer al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He says that the one who recites Surah Al-Adiyat and makes it a habit to recite Surah Al-Adiyat. Question, how does a person make it a habit to recite a surah of the Holy Quran? A person can only do that, not just by repetition throughout the day, but when he makes it part of his salah. It's a small surah, something that can be recited in the second part after Surah Al-Fatiha. That's how a person can become habituate in the recitation of certain surahs. It says a person who habituates himself in the recitation of Surah Al-Adiyat on the day of judgment, he will be raised alongside Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. This surah was revealed in the honor of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And on the day of judgment, the person who recites the surah will be raised alongside him. Someone may ask the question, what's so significant about this? We recite in the Holy Quran, there's a verse, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ سَبَقَتْ لَهُم مِّنَّ الْحُسْنَ أُولَٰئِكَ عَنْهَا مُبْعَدُونَ. On the day of judgment, because of their goodness and greatness, Allah will revive them from the earth. There is no hisab for them. There is no mizan for them. There is no sirat for them. Straight, and immediately they will be taken towards the kingdom of heaven. As-sabiqun, as-sabiqun, ulaika al-muqarrabun. And we believe that these are none other than the Anbiya and the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. The ma'asumeen. Imagine a person who recites this surah, he will be raised alongside the company of the ma'asumeen. On the day when every heart and every face will be blackened, these individuals, there will be no hisab, there will be no judgment for them. This is the first merit. The second merit, as highlighted by the Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he says the one who recites Surah Al-Adiyat and makes it a habit in the recitation of Surah Al-Adiyat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid him in the repayment of debt. If a person has a lot of debt on his shoulders, Allah will repay that debt for him or make it easy for him to repay the debt. And the idea behind this is, Inna Allah huwa razzaq. Allah is the source of rizq. I can have 2, 3 multiple jobs throughout the day, trying to increase my income. But at the end of the day, I have to realize that my income comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who distributes the rizq amongst His creation. Ahum yaksimuna rahmat rabbik. Allah challenges the Quraysh of Mecca. Are you the ones that distribute the rahmah of Allah? Of course not. Allah is the source of rizq. And the one who has debts to repay, he should turn to Allah for aid in the repayment of this debt. You can have many jobs, or you can have a very good job with a very good income. At the end of the day, Allah is in charge of that. So these are the merits in regards to Surah Al-Adiyat. Now, Surah Al-Adiyat was revealed because 12,000 enemy soldiers had gathered in the valley known as the Valley of Al-Yabis, Wadi Al-Yabis. When these 12,000 battalions or an army of 12,000 gathered, they came together and they asked the question amongst themselves. They said, look, the Muslims are becoming powerful. This was in the 8th year of Hijrah, towards the end of the life of Rasulullah, but after the battle of Khaybar, Khandak, and all of these different battles. They said the Prophet's power is becoming very strong. Sooner or later, our culture, our religion will be wiped away. We need to confront him and we need to destroy his message. So what do? He said, we need to kill Rasulullah. They made a covenant amongst themselves. They made a promise amongst themselves that we will fight the Prophet and we will kill him, and we need to kill his second as well. Second in command was whom? Ali alayhi salam. We need to kill these two personalities. Funny, even the enemies realized that Ali alayhi salam was second in command after Rasulullah. Even the enemies realized this. He said, we need to kill the Prophet and we need to kill Ali alayhi salam. And we will engage in a battle with them, and we make a promise amongst ourselves that we will kill the Prophet and Ali, and we will not retreat from battle. Even if there is a wounded soldier within the lands, within the battlefield, we will not abandon such a person until each and every one of us is dead. So they made this pact, they made this covenant. You find that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi came to know of this pact and this covenant. Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qummi, in his Tafsir al-Qummi, he says that Jibreel descends from the heavens and he relays the message. Sheikh al-Mufid says no, the Prophet came to know via the spies in the Muslim Ummah, the intelligence reports. They came towards the Prophet and they relayed the message. Nevertheless, the Prophet came to know. He comes into public, he builds or he sits on the minbar, and he brings and he calls the Muslims to come towards him. What is it, Ya Rasulullah? He begins a sermon. He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. He begins the sermon with the praise of Allah. Then he says, 12,000 armed soldiers have gathered in the valley of Al-Yabis. Allah has revealed to me that we need to confront them. They have made a covenant amongst themselves that they are to invade the city of Medina and attack us and kill my brother Ali ibn Abi Talib. We need to confront them before they attack us. This is why the Prophet takes an offensive position. When you go deeper in history, you realize that the offensive position taken by the Holy Prophet of Islam, came under the guise of defensive. Either they are to be attacked first, or they will attack us. He says that it has been made, or it has been brought to my attention that I have to choose the first companion, this person, to lead the first legion. Who was this person chosen by the Holy Prophet of Islam? Some narrations don't give a name. Some narrations say that it was Abu Bakr. He says, Abu Bakr, get ready. Take 400 men with you, 400 armed soldiers from amongst the Muslimin, and confront the people in Al-Yabis. Confront them, stand against them, and fight them. And do not retreat from your position until you have gained victory. Abu Bakr, he takes his legion of 400, he goes towards the valley of Al-Yabis. Now they say that the valley of Al-Yabis was very narrow. It had one entrance. It was very narrow. So whoever came into that valley was obviously known. It was made aware to the people of Al-Yabis. So when Abu Bakr came, it was a 3-4 day trek. They came towards the valley of Al-Yabis. When they came towards the entrance, the enemies saw the Muslims. So 200 battalions from the enemies, all armed, they came towards the Muslimin. The governor of the Mushrik and the commander of the Muslims, they confronted each other. The commander of the Mushrik said to the commander of the Muslims, "What do you want? What is your business here and why have you come?" The reply comes, "I have been sent by the Prophet of Islam to allow you to come and embrace the religion of Islam. If you embrace the religion of Islam, then we will unite and of course we worship the one God." The commander of the Mushrik replies, he says, "We have no interest in embracing the religion of Islam. We have no beef with you. Our beef is with Rasulullah and Ali ibn Abi Talib. Turn around and go back. If you do not go back and you decide to confront us, we will wipe you away. We will annihilate you." 12,000 against 400. So after much deliberation, this companion turns towards the Muslims, the Muslim army, and he says, "Everyone turn back, let's go to the city of Medina." They said, "Baba, the Prophet has given you the command to fight, and you're telling us to retreat and go back?" This companion, he turns to them and he says, "Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun." I know what you do not know. So let's go back. They came towards the city of Medina. When they entered the city of Medina, the companions came towards the Prophet of Islam and relayed the incidences of what happened. Jibreel at the same time relays the message to the Holy Prophet. The Prophet is angered. He rebukes this companion and he sends a second companion. Who is the second companion? One source doesn't give a name. The second source says it was Umar ibn al-Khattab. The second companion takes the battalion of 400 men. He goes towards the valley of Al-Yabis. Again, the same thing happens. He becomes frightened and he comes back and he retreats. He returns to the city of Medina. The Prophet rebukes him as well. And then, according to some narrations, he sends a third. Who was the third? Amr ibn al-As, who had just become Muslim, but he had military knowledge. So he sends Amr ibn al-As, he fails, and then he eventually comes back. Then finally, he turns to Ali alayhi salam. And he says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, "Prepare yourself for battle. Take these 400 men with you, amongst them Abu Bakr, Umar, and Amr ibn al-As, and lead them and confront the people of Al-Yabis." The Imam alayhi salam, in preparation for this battle and expedition, he returns to his home. When he returns to his home, he tells his wife, he says, "Bring me my helmet." There was a particular helmet that the Imam used to wear in the time of war. Some say it was a helmet, some say it was a piece of cloth that he would tie around his head. She went and she brought this helmet for him. When she presented this helmet to him, she begins to cry. Why does she cry? Because she realizes the danger of this particular battle, that is Salasil. She cries, the Imam consoles her, wipes away her tears, he prepares for battle and he leaves the city of Medina. Along with him, 400 armed soldiers. Now, what was special with regards to this particular trek that the Imam engaged in was that number one, he traveled during the night and he rested during the day. So whatever intelligence was coming from Al-Yabis, no one anticipated the coming of the Muslims. Number two, he took a different route entirely compared to what the previous commanders took. And it was a very difficult route. It was harsh terrain, rocky, by the mountainside, to such an extent that the likes of Amr ibn al-As, he began to complain. Some of the companions, they began to complain. They said, "Look, our animals are on the verge of death. Our camels and our horses, they will die eventually if we carry on this path." Some narrations say the Imam alayhi salam is silent, he doesn't respond. Some say that the Imam responds by saying, "Be quiet. I am the commander here, not you." And the Imam continues. When the Imam reaches the valley of Al-Yabis, again there are two narrations. One narration explains that in the valley of Al-Yabis, he approaches it, he rests just off the valley of Al-Yabis. Remember, the enemies, they don't know that the Muslims have arrived. The Imam turns towards the Muslims, he tells them, "Rest for the night. Give barley to your horses, prepare them for battle." They rest for the night. When it's time for Salat al-Fajr, the Imam engages in Salat al-Jama'ah. As soon as Fajr finishes, the Imam then commands his companions or his army, "We will now penetrate into the heart of the enemies." They rise on top of the hill. They reach the peak of the hill. Then the Imam charges towards the enemy. He enters the valley of Al-Yabis. He penetrates into the heart of the enemies. Remember, it's dark. It's just after Salat al-Fajr. The enemies never anticipated such an attack, and the Imam alayhi salam overpowers each and every one of them within a few moments. This is one narrative. The second narrative is that when he reaches the valley of Al-Yabis, he makes himself known to the enemies that we have arrived. And they were shocked because they never anticipated the Muslims to come back the third time or the fourth time. The general or the commander of the Mushrikeen, he confronts Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, who are you? What have you come for? What business do you have? The Imam alayhi salam responds, he says, I am Ali ibn Abi Talib, the brother of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. I have come to invite you towards the religion of Islam. Embrace Islam, and whatever is for the Muslims will be for you as well. And whatever has been made haram for the Muslims will be made haram for you as well. Come, let us unite and worship the one God, and we will become strong together. The Imam says these words. The reply comes from the Mushrikeen. They reply by saying, you sought us, you found us, you will get us. We have no interest in embracing the religion of Islam. Prepare yourself for battle. The word that this person uses, harb al-awani. Harb al-awani means the severest of battles. Prepare yourself tomorrow for the severest of battles, to such an extent that the generations coming will speak of such a battle. The Imam alayhi salam responds, he says, you threaten me? Are you honestly threatening me? I seek help from Allah, His angels, and the Muslimin. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ الْعَلِيِّ الْعَظِيمِ. They part ways. In the middle of the night, the Imam alayhi salam tells his companions, take rest, we will attack in the strike of dawn. After Salat al-Fajr, the Imam alayhi salam then penetrates into the enemy lines and he overpowers the enemies. When this happens, they say that the Imam alayhi salam, when he penetrates into the enemy lines, he kills 7 from the opposition. Many of them fled, many of them surrendered. When they surrendered, they were shackled in chains and they were taken back to the city of Medina. That's why this battle was coined the Battle of the Chains. Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu was salam. In this regards, he says that the war booty that was acquired in the battle of Dhat al-Salasil was so great, it was equivalent to the war booty acquired in the battle of Khaybar. That's how significant this battle was. When this battle took place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals Surah Al-Adiyat. Wal-Adiyati dhabha. It's such a magnificent surah. Wal-Adiyati dhabha. Adiyat is what? The running battle horses. These battle horses, the feminine horses, female horses, which were faster than the male horses, they are charging. They are running at maximum speed. Dhabha. Dhabha means what? They are panting. They are breathing heavily. When you and I sprint at our maximum speed, we begin to breathe in a certain way. Yes, we breathe heavily. The horses are running, and they are running in their maximum speed, and they are panting and breathing very heavily. Imagine the illustration developed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and presented by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, the Arabs of the time, they didn't have Netflix and Amazon Prime. To them, language was entertainment. And this surah provides the best of entertainment. The illustration provided by this surah. وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا. When they're running in their extensive speed, at their maximum speed, their hooves strike the rocks and the stones underneath them. And it triggers and it ignites sparks. Remember, it's nighttime. Salat al-Fajr has just been recited. The enemies, if they were to see the horses coming towards them, number one, they can't see the horses, they can't see the people. They see fires and sparks igniting on the ground. فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا فَالْمُغِيرَاتِ الصُّبْحًا. The attack that will take place in the time of Subh. فَأَثَرْنَ بِهِ نَقْعًا. As fast as these battle horses are running, it creates a dust cloud, a cloud of sand that camouflages them. If the enemies was to see this image, they would not know that it is the horses coming towards them. There is ambiguity. There is a cloud of camouflage that is there in the distance. فَأَثَرْنَ بِهِ نَقْعًا فَوَسَطْنَ بِهِ جَمْعًا. The Muslims, they penetrate into the center of the people of Al-Yabis and they demolish every power they had from within. When this surah was revealed, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. A question that is often raised by the people says, why didn't the Prophet of Islam engage in these battles? Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam used to say that when the battle would become extensive and become very difficult, we would seek refuge from Rasulullah. The Prophet engaged in the battle of Badr and Uhud and Khandak, for example. He was there in the front lines. But why did he send someone to lead this battle? Second question that arises is, the idea being that the Holy Prophet of Islam was much more skillful than Ali alayhi salam. We know of the valor, the bravery, and the courage and the strength of the Imam alayhi salam. Rasulullah was far greater, especially in battle. Second question arises, why didn't the Holy Prophet just send Ali ibn Abi Talib in the first instant? Why send the first, the second, the third, and then Ali alayhi salam? Likewise, in the Battle of Khaybar, the same question is raised. Why send certain companions and then Ali alayhi salam? The idea behind this was to show the people the position and the maqam of Ali alayhi salam. That he is not normal like the rest of the other companions. That if anything was to happen to Rasulullah, the message of Risala would go into the hands of Ali alayhi salam. Even the enemies knew the position of Ali alayhi salam. Hence, you find that when the Khilafah was taken away from him, they say one question often is presented. They say that in Ghadir, for example, 120,000 people witnessed the words of Rasulullah. Where were they when Saqifa happened? Why did they not support Ali alayhi salam? Our response is clear. See, the first reason is acquiescence. They remained silent. And in all fairness, the people didn't care who the next leader was. Many of them were new Muslims, so they couldn't care who the leader of the Muslim Ummah was. They never realized the significance of a divine leader. As long as it did not affect them in their everyday lives, they couldn't care less whether it was Abu Bakr or Ali alayhi salam. Secondly, there were key personnel who had hatred towards Ali ibn Abi Talib. That hatred manifested in Saqifa, that hatred manifested even after Saqifa. Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayha was the one who made this clear in public. In the sermon of Fadak, she made it clear the hatred that the people had towards her husband. She fought for justice, she supported her husband. She would go into the streets of Medina. She would go knocking on the doors of her neighbors. And she would say, you were there in Ghadir. Why do you not speak up and support my husband? And many a times they would shut the door on her. She would go towards the grave of Rasulullah. She realized the community and the hatred they had towards Ali alayhi salam, the jealousy that developed for him. She cried alongside the grave of Rasulullah. She went towards Bayt al-Ahzan, the house of sorrows, and she would cry there as well. When it comes to, for example, the Madhlumiyya of Ali ibn Abi Talib, she was there. When it comes to the Madhlumiyya of what happened in the incident of the door, she was there. But we say to her, Ya Fatima, you should have seen what happened to your son, Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. As the poet says, أفاطم لو خلت الحسين مجدلا قد مات تشانا بشط فرات إذا للتمت خد فاطمة عنده وجريت دمع العين في الوجنات. It says, oh Fatima, if you had seen what they did to your son, they slaughtered him thirsty alongside the river Furat. You would strike your cheeks, you would strike your face, and the tears would roll from your face. In the final moments of Ali al-Akbar, Abi Abdullah alayhi salam approaches his son. He says, oh my son, why do you smile and why do you cry at the same time? He says, oh my father, when I turn towards one direction, I see my grandfather Rasulullah, and with him water from the kingdom of heavens. He says, "Oh my father, but when I see towards this direction, I see my grandmother Az-Zahra. She cries and she wails, Wa Husayna. Oh my father, when she sees towards you, she strikes her face. Oh my father, she slaps her face, crying and wailing, Wa Husayna. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون." We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow the forgiveness of our sins and the sins of our marhumin, inshaAllah. May Allah raise them alongside the position of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة.